Hello there guys, what is going on? SonOfChelsea back here again for another edition of Let's Talk Chelsea. Hope you're doing well and keeping safe on this Tuesday. A lot of transfer stuff to get into today as we get closer to the deadline. Some quite surprising transfer targets once again, which shouldn't be a surprise given how much things have changed during this pretty chaotic window from a Chelsea perspective. But particularly one I'm not entirely on board with, if I'm being honest. But as well, the names we already know, Fofana, if that deal can get done, the player himself wanting to leave Leicester, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, and kind of the risk. I don't think I've kind of maybe not delved into this as much on the channel so far, but kind of the risk of that deal, in my opinion. I sort of wrote a big piece for Football London about it. Before we get into any of the good stuff today, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. I asked for questions on my community page for a Q&A I'm going to be recording tomorrow. I also asked for questions on Twitter. So either way, if you haven't submitted questions for my Q&A, already got a lot, so I am going to have to cut some out because some of them usually sort of cross around the same topics, but I will be doing a Q&A and hopefully we'll be doing them pretty regularly. So thank you for your interaction on the community page on Twitter, responding to those requests. But let's get into it with Anthony Gordon. So the game ends on Sunday. It's really chaotic and we're sort of reacting to it, and then news comes out from Sky, and I think particularly maybe from some Liverpool-based reporters, that Chelsea were interested in Anthony Gordon from Everton. Now it's come out from the Chelsea side of things, or at least people we know have a lot of great information about Chelsea and Chelsea transfers, that Chelsea have indeed bid 45 million apparently for Anthony Gordon. My colleague at Football London, Adam Newson, confirmed this today when I was speaking to him on a stream, and here you can see a report from Matt Law that says exactly the same thing. Chelsea made a bid around 45 million on a Monday that was rejected by Everton, who insist Gordon is not for sale and value him at over 50 million. It now remains to be seen whether or not Chelsea will test the resolve of Everton again in the coming days before the transfer window shuts at the end of the month. I just don't get it, I have to be honest. And that's not to say that Gordon's a rubbish player. I think he's a very talented player, and you can already see that Lampard, a bit like with Mason Mount, is kind of very much focusing efforts on getting him into the team and really developing him in his side. And you can already see those flashes of inspiration. I think one-on-one, he can be quite an electric player out wide. And if you want to look at our recruitment or attempted recruitment earlier this summer to try and sign Rafinha, and Ousmane Dembele obviously was touted weeks and weeks ago, it's not like we haven't been in for a wide player. And particularly when you factor in Callum Hudson-Odoi, Hakim Ziyech, Christian Pulisic, if any of those, more than one of those leaves, you're maybe a little bit concerned about numbers. But I just don't know what Gordon brings to Chelsea that we don't already have or couldn't develop. And I wonder with like a Hudson-Odoi, who must be a little bit frustrated looking at these links, even if himself he wants to leave him. And I think that's the right call for him. And even a Christian Pulisic, you know, you'd sit there and think, well, why can't I get this development time? Does it move the needle that much? Is it as exciting a move as, say, Rafinha would have been, who I think was ready-made to come into this team and impact things, already had impressed in the Premier League? And for the money being asked for Gordon, I don't understand how it's worth it, considering, again, other areas we could be spending in and talent that we could develop internally. It's as you can see on the thumbnail, I don't quite understand the pursuit of Gordon. I really don't, even if it is being pushed by Tuchel. It kind of does not look like the best deal for Chelsea. I think the overspending on, say, Koulibaly as an older player, in terms of wages from what you usually pay for a player of that age, Cucurella especially, I think is worth it, because we already see that you are buying very talented players who can instantly come in and impact things. I think in the long run, we won't be too concerned about the money spent on those type of players because they will impact the team positively. With Gordon, again, I just wonder, him coming to Chelsea as well at this point in his career, is it the best move for him? There's been some sort of talk that a new contract, which again, if you drum up interest and no one eventually buys him, but he gets a new contract, there always are those type of games being played. If I was going to target a young wide player in this league, from sort of a lower mid-table to lower team in the Premier League, it would be Michael Olise, who I've spoken about before. I mean, Eze as well, if you watched him against Liverpool, both at Palace. Both of those players are probably going to make Palace a lot of money in the coming years. I really like Elise. I think he is a dangerous player, and I think that he is going to cause a lot of problems for teams this season, like he did against Chelsea, if you remember, away from home. That would be a player I'd be targeting. I think very direct. I think has probably got a higher ceiling maybe than Gordon, and unfortunately was hit by injury, I think, as Eze was last year. Maybe that's just my aesthetic preference of a player, but I'm not quite sure this still is one we should be rushing to get over the line. Again, it's like time is of the essence now in this transfer window, and I'm not quite sure. Again, this is one that needs to be getting done for the sort of health of our squad, if I'm being honest. I look at Harvey Vale, who still hasn't had a move elsewhere or like a loan. Couldn't we keep him and he gets a bit of development time along with the players we already have? And if we bring in another, say, striker, as we will talk about with Aubameyang, you've got to think that Aubameyang coming in is going to impact and shift players around, because where does Kai Havertz play, for instance? Where does Amanda Broja fit in? Where does Mason play? Where does Raheem play? There's a lot of moving parts within all of that that then could hurt Anthony Gordon if he was to come in as well. It's just, again, I just don't think it's worth it. You may disagree, let me know in the comments. Let's move on quickly to Wesley Fofana. This report from my colleague at Football London, Bobby Vincent, and several people have reported this around that Wesley Fofana is sort of growing frustrated about Leicester kind of not selling up and not sort of opening, the move for him to come to Stamford Bridge. Football.London understands the 21-year-old feels like the Foxes are trying to price him out of a move to the Blues by requesting a world record fee. Fofana has already agreed personal terms over a move to Chelsea, but the Blues have seen two offers, with the highest being around 70 million turned down by Leicester. Chelsea are expected to submit a third bid in the region of 80 million for Fofana and have growing confidence that it will be accepted by their Premier League rivals. So Fofana, I did see one report from Nazar Cancelo that suggested that the game on Saturday against Arsenal was going to stop Chelsea buying Fofana, which did make me chuckle, because I just don't buy that personally, that you've been scouting this guy for so long and just one game means that, like, we're all right, we'll move on for someone else. That's just, I don't quite buy that. And I can understand Fofana's growing maybe stress or kind of concern of days ticking down and this move not being done. But you keep on hearing noises that Chelsea, with their next bid, is going to be really serious and they'll get this over the line. So I feel pretty confident that Wesley Fofana will be a Chelsea player, because I just think it's so important. And again, on Sunday, you saw why, and I wrote about this, why I think we need Fofana, because it gives Reece James the license to play further up the pitch. That's not the only reason, because you want the player individually, Fofana, for the money we're going to be spending, to be a good defender on his own. But I just think it opens up more options for Thomas Tuchel this season. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, apparently Barcelona are expecting a Chelsea offer for him this week. This is from Matt Law in The Telegraph. It is understood that Barcelona want around 21 million for Aubameyang, with talks expected to intensify this week after Chelsea's need for a goal scorer was again highlighted in the derby draw with Tottenham. Chelsea produced a superb performance that delighted head coach Tuchel, but his team still missed a number of clear chances that would have seen off the threat of Spurs snatching a draw. Tuchel has made Aubameyang his top target, and Chelsea's new owners have already demonstrated a desire to back the German this summer. We've spoken about Aubameyang before, and I'm conflicted on it, because I can see it working purely because of the relationship between the coach and player. But my worry is the relationship between the coach and player, if Aubameyang is allowed to maybe get away with things that, say, others haven't. I wrote about this again, like the way Tuchel dealt with the Lukaku interview and how much support he gained from that. If we start hearing reports that Aubameyang is doing what he was doing at Arsenal and he isn't being reprimanded for it, what's going to be the impact in the dressing room? What's going to be the impact, outside, the perception of that? But, watching back a lot of Aubameyang's goals for Dortmund when Tuchel was there, you see a lot of encouragement, I think, from what Tuchel would want stylistically, like compared to Ronaldo, compared to other options that have been touted this summer. The one thing you can say about Aubameyang is that he absolutely would understand, I think, and would fit into what Tuchel wants to do with that front three. I think on Sunday you just got a perfect demonstration of what Tuchel wants Chelsea's attack to be. very fluid, very interchangeable, but maybe just at the moment lacking that focal presence and that finisher in the middle. Can Aubameyang offer that to Chelsea on a consistent basis? The only thing you're saying, though, is considering what Barcelona would want for Aubameyang, given the wages, given what would be paid, he'd not come in to be a rotational player. I'm pretty sure he'd be coming in to be first choice, at least from the start. The knock-on effect of that, but also, it's a very short-term way of looking at things, isn't it, with Aubameyang? But at this point in the window, there isn't many other options. But could Chelsea wait for someone else? And you hope that Broja and Havertz gets going, Broja gets going, Raheem gets going, and we start scoring goals. That's obviously a risk, but I also think there are risks in signing Aubameyang too, culturally. That's kind of my concern. I don't have doubts that he'd be a decent player for Chelsea, but I think the whole Ronaldo situation at United is such a great example that despite a player scoring a lot, weirdly there is collateral damage there. I don't think Aubameyang will be exactly the same, but if you've watched a little bit of All or Nothing, the Arsenal documentary on Amazon, or just hearing how that fallout went, is there a problem? I think most people would probably still want Aubameyang, to be honest, because he did score a lot of goals for Arsenal in the Premier League and could probably play across the front line too. And I say the good relationship between player and coach might be essential here in convincing Aubameyang to join Chelsea if Chelsea want to pay that much for him from Barcelona. Yeah, of course, we've got all the fallout from Spurs still going on. If you haven't seen my rational perspective around, similar to the length of this video, just breaking down the game, please go and watch it. My Substack this week is actually about Arsenal All or Nothing, the documentary. It's about kind of how these documentaries are, or how serious they are, and kind of what they tell us, particularly my point of view on sort of supporters being represented, maybe not as well in the Amazon documentaries so far. So please go and give that a read. As I say, it's not very Chelsea specific, but I do reference one thing about Chelsea right at the start. So please go and give it a read, and all my work on Football London, sort of reflecting on Sunday's game, but also looking ahead as we get closer to that Leeds game, the third game of the Premier League season. Thank you guys for watching. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again very soon. All the best.